Hello and welcome to the 48 minutes of purgatory we call the D1Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Healy, sitting in for Michael Patrick Rooney, and I've got some of our best men on this podcast here. We've got Aaron Fitt, we've got Kendall Rogers, we've got the whiz kid Bradley Smart. We got a lot of business to get to today, gentlemen. We've got some All-American talk. We're going to talk a little bit about our toughest decisions with our All-American. As you're listening to this, the All-American teams are out, so go look at those and get angry about them at your own leisure. We're also going to talk about the teams that just missed the top 25. So another thing to get angry about are just missed the top 25 teams. We're going to talk about those teams, why we would have liked to have included them in the top 25, why ultimately they did not make the top 25. But we are recording this on Monday, January 19th, fellas, and I want to start us off with some banter about Aaron's favorite topic, college football. College football national title game tonight, Indiana and Miami. You might have heard Indiana sweeping the nation. He wins. Google him. So I looked at the sports books today, and it looks like the line right now, Indiana minus 7.5. So a 7.5 point favorite. So we're going to put ourselves on record here as to what we think. So by the time you listen to this, listeners, you will know the result, and you will know which of us were correct and incorrect. I'm going to start with Bradley. Bradley, what do you got? Indiana minus 7.5 national title game tonight.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they'll cover that. Everything. I'm not a huge college football guy. It's hard to follow a lot, I'd say. And my schools are tough to watch at times, but I think Indiana will cover. They're very talented from every game highlight I've seen of them. So I'll have them cover. I think they'll probably win by like 2 or 3 scores. The finals are never really that close.
That's fair. Kendall, what do you got?
I'll go with Indiana by 7.
Oh, so Miami going to cover the number.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, the get-in price, it was about $5,000 like 4 days ago. The get-in price, just like literally the worst seat in the house right now, $3,380. You gotta really want to go to the football game to get in for that price. Yep.
Aaron, what do you got? I know Aaron's really been breaking this game down. No, I know you've been doing the research on this. Get all your notes out there, man. What do you got? What do you got on this game?
Hard pass. Don't care.
So
Next topic.
He's taken Miami.
Aaron, hey, just so our listeners and viewers know, Aaron is like old man screaming at clouds about college football. Like he's like Gran Torino Clint Eastwood when it comes to college football.
It's garbage product. I don't care. Don't need to talk about it. What's next?
He's just mad his Bucks were eliminated like 4 weeks ago.
We're sad about the Bucks.
Yeah.
I will take Miami to cover the number, Indiana to win, Miami to cover the number. Miami's defense is such that I think we're going to get a little bit of a lower score than what we've gotten throughout. But I think at this point we have completely surrendered the right to be surprised if Indiana wins this game by like 40 points, because that just kind of feels like feels like the way they've done this postseason. So
yeah, and to make this baseball related, both Miami and Indiana ought to have pretty good baseball teams as well.
Hey, there you go. That's what we call a transition.
Good tie-in.
Wow, that was a pro.
See, I'm a
professional.
Segue. I'm a pro.
I can see our producers in the background shaking their heads as we talk here. So okay, let's move on to baseball. Let's Pat, 1 for Indiana, 2 for Miami. Just hold up fingers. He's got Indiana. Okay.
Pat at least probably roots for Drake May. I mean, Fitt is a Massachusetts native who ditched his team when Brady left, and a quarterback that went to his alma mater is now the Patriots quarterback, and he refuses to hop back.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Come on.
Listen, your man. Now that your man Belichick is gone, it's time to come back home. Invested in a fun Patriots team, big Mike Vrabel guy.
Same. I love Mike Vrabel. I feel like the bar fight meter for Vrabel is like a 9.5, if not higher.
Yeah, it's high up there for sure.
Okay.
Also, that is one of our official metrics, by the way, bar fight meter on our All-American team. Yeah. So let's get into.
Oh, we should have done that on our team scouting grades too, like bar fight meter for the actual team.
That's a good idea.
Well. All right, let's go.
Next year. There's always next year. So we're going to focus on, look, if you want to see the full All-American teams, you can do so at D1Baseball.com. We're not going to run through every position here. You can go check those out on the site. But we did want to talk a little bit about some of the most difficult decisions we had in this process. And I actually want to start at outfield because I felt like this was a difficult one to suss out. And Kendall, I'm going to come to you on this one, where we we debated, well, what do you do with Caden Sorrell at Texas A&M, a guy who's really struggled to be healthy. When he's healthy, he's really productive, but we just haven't seen him over a full season. So we had to debate him versus like Alex Hernandez at Georgia Tech, who's, a little bit more of a proven guy in terms of a full season. So you were a big Caden Sorrell advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, that's the direction we went. What kind of led you to make that decision?
Well, I kind of go back to last year. I mean, this is a guy that, after a pretty good freshman campaign, obviously very tooled up, has a chance to be a first-round pick in the MLB draft here in a few months. And last year, I mean, he was probably playing at about 70 to 75% with a hamstring issue when he did come back and was somewhat healthy. And the guy still managed to hit 337 with 12 home runs and 32 RBIs. So, I look back at what he did in the last year. I look back at what he did in the fall. And my look against TCU, he was fantastic. And so you look at the tools, you look at the kind of the prospect status, and you just look at the production. You got to figure if he's healthy, he's going to have a monster year for A&M and certainly an All-American worthy campaign.
I think that's totally fair. I think ultimately we all kind of came down in a similar place where it was just the production when he's been on the field is too hard to deny, and just betting on that upside, betting on the fact that, it could very well be his kind of last chance to show out for A&M before he goes off into pro baseball. So I think it'll be extremely motivated to make that happen this year. We also had an interesting debate at the utility position, which is always tough because there are only so many two-way players in college baseball, and we usually have at least one or two obvious ones, and then we have to kind of scrounge around. And I think this is a little bit of a philosophical debate as much as it is a debate about the merits of the player, because in this case, we had two obvious choices for first and second team. And then for third team, we came down to, a couple of players, one of whom is much more famous than the other, but one of the other of whom is more guaranteed to be a contributor on both sides. So we ended up talking about Tate Davis at Louisville, who is the more famous player, extremely productive offensive player, but unsure exactly how much he's going to pitch. Then on the other side, Brecken Nace from Radford, who is guaranteed to be right in the middle of everything for the Highlanders. But on the other hand, he's not the same player that Tate Davis is. Like no one's taking him over Tate Davis in that case. So I'm going to go to Aaron actually on this one, because you have the most experience kind of trying to put these puzzle pieces together of All-American teams. Tell me a little bit about just the thinking process there, like about how you judge all of these different variables when it comes to utility guys.
And just for the sake of our listeners, the two obvious guys who got the first two spots, Evan Dempsey, of course, from Florida Gulf Coast, who's the clear-cut number one two-way player in the country.
Team USA guy.
John Olerud Award winner.
That's right. He's the obvious guy. And then Kenny Ishikawa from Georgia, who's transferred in from Seattle. Those two were pretty easy. And then after that, we also talked about Kyle Johnson for UVA, who might have been on our preseason team last year. I know we talked about him last year in the preseason. I mean, he's been a guy that has tantalized for a couple of years with his two-way ability, but at this point, it's a little bit of show me time for KJ. So we backed off of that one. But I mean, he's a junior. Wouldn't surprise me if he winds up. He could be their Friday guy, and he could be, when he's not pitching, he could be their DH or even an outfielder. I mean, he could wind up having a big two-way year. Wouldn't surprise me. He's in the mix as well. Brecken Nace, is a guy that I think he threw 45 innings last year, had 232 plate appearances. So he's got a little bit of an established track record going both ways, was a very productive hitter, about 1,000 OPS. But obviously lesser competition. And I think he's expected to be their number 3 starter or so. He'll be a weekend starter. So we do know that he's going to have a pretty good two-way role. But Tate Davis is a guy that frankly could have been a preseason All-American at first base. It's just a very loaded position. We didn't have a spot for him at first base, but he is out of that group. He's the one guy that has kind of proven himself as an All-American caliber player in one or the other, right? Either as a hitter or a pitcher. In Davis's case, it's as a hitter. Nace hasn't done that at that level. Johnson hasn't done that at that level. Davis has. He's an All-American caliber hitter. And I happened to see him pitch in the fall. And again, it's, I didn't really expect that much because he didn't pitch really last year, just a couple innings. But it's a big lefty who was 92, 94 with just ridiculous turbo sink and spin the hell out of a slider. And I was like, whoa, it was one look but it was a really impressive look. It was actual pitchability. It was command. I mean, again, 1 inning, but like he just dominated. And that combined with the reports that I got from the Louisville staff, I mean, I'm willing to buy on that. I think he's going to be a key part of their bullpen this year. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. He, at the very least, will give you All-American production as a hitter. I have no doubt about that. So it just felt like he's the guy that is probably most deserving of All-American recognition based on his track record and his talent.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Pitcher, you kind of expect, it's big power at the plate. He's a physical guy. He's, imposing figure. And then on the mound, it's kind of funk, so I think that's part of it for me too, is it was not the look I expected when I've seen him on the mound. I too saw him in a short stint, like in the fall 2 years ago, I think is what it was. And so, yeah, I think I'm holding that against him because I just kind of expected this big time extension, use his height, power, fastball kind of thing. And it wasn't that, which is fine. Like, that's not a criticism. It's just like, it didn't look like I expected it to look. And so it's kind of hard for me to like see Tank Davis as a pitcher. And that's not fair, but it's the reality of what I'm dealing with.
It's a lower slot, but it's got deception, but it's not like he's a funky deception guy. It's a power guy who just has a lower slot. That's an advantage if you have deception and you have a 94-mile-an-hour fastball that has crazy life. I mean, that's
right. Well, and it's sink and it's
Yeah.
sink, not like right in the zone. Speaking of pitchers, we had some debates at starting pitcher, and Bradley, you can help me out with this one. You can choose which one you'd like to grab onto here, because we had a debate at the back. I don't want to say the back end of the first team, because there's really no such thing. You're first team or you're not. But on the first team between Dylan Volantis and Hunter Elliott, which might be the two of the most opposite pitchers in terms of track record that we have, where you've got Hunter Elliott, who has been there forever and has two really established seasons as a front end guy, and Volantis, who's never been a weekend starter in the SEC. And the other debate that we had was on the third team, we kind of had Gabe Gackle in the mix. We had Smith Bailey from Arizona in the mix. We had Jack Oman from Yale in the mix, and end up going with Jack Oman. So which of those two debates was more interesting to you, Bradley, and help us out a little bit with where we landed?
Yeah, I think the first one was, and what really struck me is you mentioned Gackle in the second debate. That sort of contributed to our decision on the first one, because we all know Dylan Volantis is an incredible talent on the mound, but we also know that he's moving into the rotation after not doing that. And that isn't as easy as it, may seem, even if, you're a Gabe Gackle. Like last year with Arkansas, that was not a straightforward adjustment, and they ended up moving him back, and he had a lot of success again. And so they're obviously trying that again. But I think that really informed us, because if you look at like Hunter Elliott, that is a proven SEC starter. He's returning. He led he's the leading returner by strikeouts in the SEC. Just tons of experience as a starter. And I think it was flip-flopping those and saying, okay, let's go with the proven, guy. Volantis' upside is immense, but it makes more sense to have someone that has been a starter, has done that week in and week out at a really high level.
On the second debate, I'll just chime in here too. I think for me, it came down to Smith Bailey and Jack Oman, and no disrespect to Gackle, but for me, it was kind of the point you're making, which is that we kind of saw him try this, and it was just fine. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It was just kind of fine. And he was clearly more comfortable as a reliever. And so, we're just going to kind of, if he proves it, he'll be an All-American when it really matters. And that's in the postseason. So that was kind of where we went there. And we ultimately go Jack Oman just because there's a precedent we've kind of set where returning All-Americans, and he was an All-American for us at the end of last season, tend to be preseason All-Americans. And that kind of ended up being the trump card, if you will, for him over Smith Bailey, a guy who deserves it, but ultimately we just didn't have room. And that's the nature of this type of debate, is that you're never going to have room for everybody you want to put on the list. So one more, and Bradley, you're going to have to help us out with this one probably again too. We had a relief pitcher debate on the third team between Ryan Bilka, a name that I don't think a lot of people probably know very much about, and Easton Hawk, who I think people got to know a little bit with UCLA at the end of last season. Bilka going to Miami, this is kind of your beat. Who is Ryan Bilka? For those who don't know a lot about him, why do we have him on the All-American team?
Yeah, Bilka is one of those relievers. This is one of the things that I sort of wrestled with is, what do you prioritize in a reliever? Like, they're two very different types. There's the guys that eat up a lot of innings, and then there's this really effective, short stint guys. And Bilka falls into the sort of more long reliever type. And so Brady Frederick might be a more well-known name because, Tennessee, but Bilka kind of very similar stuff last year for Richmond, 62 innings over 18 appearances, able to shoulder a pretty big load. And I think it was like 57-13 strikeout to walk ratio. So he's really uncomfortable at bat, and he can go multiple innings. And on that Miami team that's, replacing their closer, he's going to be the sort of go-to guy there. And I think he's a really dynamic arm. And certainly Easton Hawk is very capable as well. But if you kind of look at what they did last year, Bilka sort of had the edge just in, quantity and even quality.
Yeah, I think that's where I came down. I went with Bilka over Hawk as well for a similar reason, just that, Hawk tended to be in that typical UCLA mold, just kind of a short reliever, a one-inning closer. They love their roles at UCLA under John Savage, and I think he could do more. I'm confident he will do more, but Bilka just has that last season was just everything you could have wanted. He was a stopper. He was a multi-inning guy, bulk innings guy, kind of all of the above. And I think that's probably how they'll use him at Miami as well. Why wouldn't you? So I think we ultimately made the right choice there.
Yeah. The other guy I would mention too, and I think I was the only person who voted for him, but I would keep an eye on Thomas Burns at Texas. Actually, Joe just had a kind of a video from Highway to Hoover out today on our socials about him. But I mean, in the fall when I saw him, he was like 98 to 100 with like crazy rise on his fastball. The slider looked better. He's obviously kind of a hard-nosed, come-at-you type of pitcher, and I think he's going to have a wonderful year in the back end of that Texas rotation.
Yeah, a pick to click for sure. Go ahead, Aaron.
Just a few other guys that, and if you guys want to throw a couple out there as well.
Sure.
Guys that broke my heart that we didn't get on the team. I really wanted Maddox Maloney from Oregon. Shortstop is a loaded position. In fact, one thing we wound up having to do is we put Chris Hakopian at the second team DH spot, and we put Henry Ford at third team DH. I would have liked to have had Henry Ford higher on the team. To me, he feels like he should. I think he's going to finish the year as a first team All-American, but it's kind of a logjam at the third base position as well as shortstop. And, so Maloney and Eric Becker from Virginia, another one, just kind of got left out at the shortstop spot, which is tough. But, in third base, Joe, I know you're really high on Brendan Lawson, and that's a guy that feels like an All-American that we had 4 third basemen ahead of him with Cuvée and Ace Reese and Roman Martin and Ford. And we're just playing around out of real estate. So one thing we don't do in baseball is we don't cheapen our awards by making 100 guys on them. It should be an honor. It's not easy to be an All-American. And so there's a lot of deserving players we'd love to recognize, and we just don't have room. And we're never gonna add spaces just so that we can, accommodate more social media clicks or whatever. That's not what we're about. The team is the team. And if you don't make it, it's tough. It's hard for us to leave you out because there are a lot of players we like.
Yeah, the other one I would mention too, not a reliever, but the other potential All-American I mentioned would be Liam Peterson. Yeah. A lot of people are going to be really surprised not to see him on our All-American teams. Obviously, we believe in the stuff. It's an electric arm. The stuff is premium. The big question with him is just command. And Aiden King was on one of our teams, but Peterson has a lot to prove, guys.
I think that's right. I'll jump in here because he's one that for me that I struggle with because it just felt like last year he was very good, but it wasn't quite up to where we thought he could be based on the quality of the stuff. And so we're kind of waiting and seeing on him. You also mentioned Brendan Lawson, Aaron. I was bummed we weren't able to get them there, but one of the things here is that we end up having to look at what you've done, and the numbers they were very, very good. I think they'll be a lot better this year. And then the numbers, when you stack them up, just weren't quite there with the other third baseman in it. But it was heartbreaking to not get him on there because if you want to project forward, he's someone I feel a lot of confidence in having a bigger year moving forward. Bradley, what about you? Anybody that you kind of are bummed out that you weren't able to get onto the list?
Yeah, from my Friday starters background, the starting pitching was just a nightmare to do. I think in total we had 30 guys that at least one person, had put on one of the teams when we were voting on this. Just from my beat too, Trey Beard at Florida State, Ryan Marone at NC State, even, Cam Bagwell at, UNC Wilmington to Wake Forest. He was a freshman All-American. So it's so tough. But also when you really think about it, there's over 900 weekend starters in Division I college baseball. That's a lot. And to cut it down to 15 is you're gonna miss people that you really want to have on there. And that's just a part of it. And I do think it's really great to have, those three sets of 5, because it really makes you just dial in and make sure you're all talking about the right guys.
And of course, remember, folks, player rankings are coming. That's kind of the extension of the preseason All-American teams. Is we'll rank the top 50 at every position. I think we go 100 deep on outfielders, 100 or 150 deep on starting pitchers. So there'll be an opportunity to recognize more players that we really like, and you'll see kind of how we as a staff stack them up as we head into the season. So keep an eye on those. I think starting next week, we'll begin rolling out the player rankings.
Also, tough to cut down is our top 25, and that kind of leads us into our second part of this conversation here. There were teams that ultimately we fought hard over and really debated and wanted to get on the list in a lot of cases, and you only have room for 25. Not enough people talk about this. On a top 25, you actually have to have exactly 25 teams. People don't talk about that enough, but that's the reality. I don't know if a lot of people know that. You have to have 25. So we're going to talk about some teams that got left on the cutting room floor in no particular order, because we frankly didn't really order them. We just kind of said, here's the 12 that were left on the cutting room floor. So I'm going to kick this. We're going to have an order here. We've got our teams already assigned, but we're going to go Aaron, Kendall, Bradley, and then myself. So Aaron is going to kick it off, and he's going to talk about, I believe, the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Yeah, you are correct, Joe. This was a tricky one because, we ranked 11 teams in the SEC, I think, in the top 25, something like that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things we like in this league, but somebody's got to lose games too. I mean, there's every game that is played in conference, somebody wins and somebody loses. And so if you've got 11 teams that are top 25 caliber, not everyone can go 17-13 in the league. Somebody's got to be below 500. And we like this Alabama team. I like this Alabama team a lot. I think Mark Etheridge agrees with me that it's probably the best team of the Rob Vaughn era, which means they'll probably be in a regional again and could win a regional again. I mean, they've done that before. Was it 2023? They were in a super at Wake Forest, I believe. So they've been a consistent postseason team in the Rob Vaughn era. And again, they could very well, be a team that's often in the top 25 this year, but they've got star power. Justin LeBron, of course, is a superstar, one of the best players in college baseball and most talented, a top 5 pick, kind of a talent for the draft. I mean, just a dynamic defender at short with real bat speed, and he's still growing into his power, and he has hit for power already. He's a centerpiece, but I mean, I think the guys around him are pretty darn good. Jason Torres is a player that had a nice season last year as a transfer from Miami, who I think is continuing to get better. I'm expecting a good year from him. You've got some pop with Logan Davenport coming in from Northern Kentucky. Some nice veteran pieces. You guys know I'm a big Bryce Fowler guy. I mean, that's someone that I didn't necessarily think would be back for another year. Heading into last year, I thought he was going to be a draft guy. He's got speed and power and plays center field. He's an athlete, fun player. So nice pieces in the lineup. And then, of course, I mean, the big thing is being healthy on the mound, I think. Zane Adams, Tyler Fay, Bobby Alcock gives you, I think, a chance for a pretty darn good trio of power arms in that rotation. And I do actually like the depth and the variety in their bullpen, too, with Matthew Heiberger and Caden Humphrey kind of leading the way. This is a good club, and there's some good freshmen, too. I mean, there's a lot to like about this team. Definitely going to be a top 25 team. We can't rank 14 SEC teams. That's kind of the bottom line.
Yeah. I mean, you can if you want.
You could, I guess you could. We didn't.
That freshman class to me is a key. It's the best freshman class that Rob Vaughn has had as a coach there. And if those guys are ready, if some subset of those guys are ready to be instant impact guys, I think it really raises the ceiling. It's a pretty high floor team, I would say. But the ceiling, I think, is controlled by how ready those freshmen are to contribute right away.
Yeah, and the one I'm most excited about of those freshmen is Underwood, right? I mean, that's the Upchurch, rather.
Upchurch, yeah.
Miles Upchurch, yeah.
Miles Upchurch is it can spin the hell out of it. Really, really good young arm that I think has a bright future.
Kendall, you are next up. Tell us a little bit about the Arizona State Sun Devils.
Yeah, just kind of going back to last year real quick, I thought those guys going 18-12 in the Big 12, getting to a regional, I thought it was a big step forward for Willie Bloomquist and the staff. And now we'll kind of find out if they can build on it. There are some question marks with this team, and we'll get to that in a minute. But one area we do feel really good about with the Sun Devils was their ability to hit. Which at a place like Phoenix Muni, typically a pretty offensive-friendly environment. So if you look at the Devils just from top to bottom, I mean, Dominique Smaldino, this is an older team now in terms of transfers. Dominique Smaldino, Austin Rolick from Utah is a nice electric player. I know he's a Coach Rooney favorite. PJ Mutsaridis a couple years ago. Cal was one of the top freshmen of the country, obviously an accomplished background. Landon Harrison, a very tooled up guy. And then you look at the two, or the three additional power additions: Dominic Longo from Utah Valley, Dean Toigo from UNLV, and a Bradley Smart favorite and Garrett Mitchell from Virginia Tech. All three of those guys can hit with big time power. If Mitchell's healthy, he could have a big time breakout year for the Devils. So they're going to hit. The question with Arizona State going into the season is, can Cole Carlone make that move to the Friday spot that we can rotation? It feels like there's several teams out there that we think are going to be pretty good that have a closer or a key reliever moving to a Friday role. And when it's good for Carlone, it's pretty special. I mean, it's a 97 to 98 mile an hour arm. It's impressive, but can he, instead of going out there and giving you an inning or two, can he go out there and give you 5 or 6 strong innings? That's a question mark for me. And the other one for me is Cole Klecker from TCU, the TCU transfer. This was a guy that, again, was one of the best pitchers in the country as a freshman 2 seasons ago. Things didn't work out for him at TCU last year. Had a much smaller role when he pitched. It wasn't especially great. Can he kind of reinvent himself a little bit in Tempe? We'll find out. If Arizona State's pitching pans out, not only is this a top 25 team, I think this could be an Omaha team. That's just a very glaring question mark for me as we enter the 26 campaign.
It does feel like a little bit of a pivotal year. It feels like they've steadied the ship at Arizona State a little bit after some rough waters, and now looking to build on what they did last year, as you mentioned, Kendall. That takes us to Bradley. Bradley's going to tell us a little bit about Dallas Baptist.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that's always in the conversation. 41 wins last year. I think it's 40-plus wins in 9 of 10 years. Cruised through Conference USA in the regular season. I think they only lost 6 conference games. So they're set up for another really big year. They lost a lot. I think 5 draftees, 2 undrafted free agents, but it's one of those teams where you just have full faith that they're going to reload, hit on junior college guys, develop internally. And I think there's a lot of pieces in there to like. The rotation has a chance to be really good. Ryan Borberg heading that up, 80 innings, sub 3.5 ERA last year. Jared Schaefer from Akron and Russ Smith from Cowley are 2 good pickups. And I think, it's another year of a coaching change, assistant coaching changes for Dallas Baptist, because they kind of keep hiring guys that end up getting really, promotions elsewhere. So I think it's another new guy in charge of the pitching staff there, but they're going to hit again. Ben Tryon, Kean Grady, a lot of proven bats, and a lot of exciting guys. So I think they're a team that wouldn't be surprised to look up at the end of the year and they're past that 40-win mark again.
Yeah, the other guy, by the way, I would include in there too is I'm kind of fascinated to see, speaking of reinventing himself, Dylan Cupp, the Mississippi State transfer. I mean, this was a guy that, when he showed up in Starkville, I'm not sure there was a freshman position player for them that had, higher claim. And obviously things didn't work out for him at MSU, but, he's one of those guys. I mean, he certainly has the tools to have a big-time breakout campaign.
That's a good call. A bit of a transition period for DBU as well. This is their last year in CUSA. After that, they moved to the rebuilt Pac-12, which, is shaping up to be a nice little baseball conference. That ought to be a lot of fun. But one more ride in CUSA for DBU. That brings it to me, yours truly. And I'm going to talk about Ole Miss, a team that I was really pushing for, that just ultimately there just wasn't room, right? So I think what I like most about them is that it's a team that's built pretty similarly to the one we saw last year that hosted a regional. And sure, okay, they lost in a home regional. I get that was disappointing, but you can't argue with the results during the regular season. So it's made up pretty similarly. They've got some transfers in the lineup, but it's a very physical offense lineup that's going to hit. An important piece here is that I think an overlooked roster building thing is when you have players who had other opportunities. Maybe they could have signed in pro ball, for example, and the example of these two players I'm going to mention, but they ultimately decide to come back. And Ole Miss got that with Judd Utermark and Austin Foley, both guys that very well could have gone off. I mean, Utermark in particular, he's just so tooled up, is a guy who could have been in pro ball, could have moved on, decided to start his pro career. He's proved himself at this level, but he ultimately comes back. And then Austin Foley is a guy that was a big surprise last year, ended up hitting 20 home runs for Ole Miss, really gave that lineup impressive length. Getting him back, same thing. Very easily a guy that could have moved on to the next level. He's proved everything he needs to prove here at this level, but ultimately comes back. I think that's really, really good news for Ole Miss. What ultimately kind of gave me pause, though, and kept them maybe out of the top 25 are questions behind Hunter Elliott in the rotation is one thing. Hunter Elliott, we know what we're going to get from him. We know that he's going to be a traditional workhorse. It's, a guy who's gives you a chance to win every time out, a guy who can dominate games from time to time. But the questions behind him are worth asking, because they're going to be looking at a guy like a Cade Townsend to move into the rotation behind him. And it's also worth noting that this is the first time really they've had Elliott at the front of the rotation with a rebuilt rotation behind him, because last year it was veterans in the entire rotation, guys who had been together for 4 or 5 years. Well, this is going to be different. And it has been a little bit of a sticking point for Ole Miss. You look at some of those teams that disappointed for Ole Miss in 2023 and 2024, and one of the threads between those teams was the pitching development just wasn't where they needed it to be. They struggled to find guys to get outs at the key times. That's going to be a question again this year behind Elliott. Similar question, the bullpen. They, had some McCausland move on, Connor Spencer move on. They're going to need to backfill those roles in the bullpen. My confidence level in this team mashing is extremely high. My confidence level behind Elliott and them pitching at a high-end SEC level is less. But they showed us that they could do it last year. That was what kind of hung me up is, hey, look, this was a host team last year. Do we really need to have them outside of the top 25? Should they be included? Ultimately, they didn't quite get there. But again, like Alabama, a talented enough team, we would not be shocked to have them in the top 25 at some point during the season. That takes us back to Aaron. Aaron's going to take us to the Pacific Northwest. What do you got there, Aaron?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, we're going to go to Oregon. The Ducks were a team that I saw a couple of days in the fall and liked what I saw. I just think it's a very physical. It's become a staple, I think, of Mark Wasikowski's program up there. Is that their physicality stands out on the West Coast. I mean, he said a couple of years ago, even we think we have SEC kind of physicality in our roster, and that's kind of been a hallmark of the program moving forward. And it's still the case. I mean, you look at that infield in particular. I just think has a chance to be one of the nation's best. I'm a big Maddox Maloney guy. I mentioned him earlier on the show. Really a 4.5 tool player. He's got real power. He's way better than I thought he was going to be at shortstop. For a bigger, thick guy that has juice. Like, he moves well, and he certainly can really throw. He's a star. And I think Ryan Cooney is kind of like an under the radar, really, really good player at second base. That's an elite middle infield combination that also is quite offensive. Drew Smith has been around and been a productive player there for several years. He's played the outfield. I always thought he could play third base, and I think that's where he's going to be this year. And then Gabe Miranda, they brought in from Northern Kentucky at first base, to bring some power and some patience, some hitability. So great infield. I think that's the biggest strength of the team. I do think that there's plenty of athletes and options and a variety in the outfield as well. If Dominic Hellman comes back healthy and has a good full season, that guy is enormous. It might be 80 grade raw power. It's just a matter of being completely healthy all year long and putting it to use and making enough contact. But he's shown flashes of it. That's a potential real difference maker, X factor guy to keep an eye on. Do they have enough on the mound? We'll find out. I think they have, again, depth where they don't have really a proven dudes at the top end. Grayson Grinzel's gone and Jason Wright's, they're kind of up 2 starters last year. They have to replace those guys. I think Will Stanford's taking a big step forward as a sophomore. I got a good look at him in the fall. Looked great. Cal Scolari they brought in from San Diego, who pitched 70 innings last year, had a good year. I think it's a pretty good 1-2 punch, but we just see him kind of do it, and the pieces behind him. I think there could very well be enough there. This was a team that I thought was going to be a top 25 team when I saw them in the fall. Ran out of real estate, and they do have a little bit to prove with the mound, but I do think the pieces are there, and they could give UCLA a nice run in the Big Ten.
Another program that feels like the floor is just established really, really high for them.
Yeah.
And it's a team that I think is going to be at the top of the Big Ten for a long time. Kendall, you're up next. What do you got on Oklahoma?
Yeah, Oklahoma could have been like the 15th SEC team that we ranked. I think if you look at the Sooners, this is an intriguing team. This is a club that, finished last season, 1 win away from getting to a super regional in Chapel Hill against North Carolina. And then, if you look at these guys offensively, Aaron just talked about really good infields. This is going to be an elite infield as well. I mean, I think if you look up the middle with these guys, with Jackson Willett's one of the best shortstops in the country, Kyle Branch at second base, Dayton Talkie, big time power there at one hot corner position at first. And then you look at, third base with Camden Johnson, the Wichita State transfer. He's one of those guys that, Skip Johnson was super excited about what he did in the fall. He was one of their leading hitters in the fall. He's expected to make an instant impact. And what's kind of a recurring theme with his Oklahoma team, this has kind of been their MO over the last few years of Reggie Willits running that offense, is Johnson's very versatile. He's a guy that can play in the outfield if he needs to. He could steal some bases. He's going to hit for some power. So he's kind of a do-it-all kind of player. You look at the outfield with, Jason Walk and Nolan Stevens leading the way. Nolan Stevens, of course, the Mississippi State transfer. There's some pop in that bat. I like the fact he's an older guy from the left side. And then the biggest question mark with Oklahoma, we feel pretty good about their offense, but their question mark is undoubtedly the pitching staff, which is interesting considering Skip Johnson's MO is pitching. But they're hinging a lot on Cam Johnson. We talked earlier about players that we thought had high acclaim as when they arrived on campus. Cam Johnson. I mean, he was a guy that could have gone in the first round out of high school. Goes to LSU. Things haven't panned out for him over the last couple of years. But I tell you what. The fall. It was 95, 98 with elite command. Which, if Cam Johnson, the issue with him has been sustainability. In terms of velocity and just the overall command of the stuff. If the command and the stuff is there when the lights come on in the spring, that could be a big-time breakout candidate, and also could be the differentiator between Oklahoma just being a fringe regional team or potentially being a super regional team or Omaha club. But I do like the rest of the rotation with Drew Rarick and Mason Bixby. Bixby, the TCU transfer, certainly a big-time arm. Has logged some significant and important innings in the past in a Power 4 conference. Then Drew Rarick, if you go back and look at my fall report on Texas, last fall, I was pretty excited about this guy. He was a little raw being a South Dakota kid, but it's a big husky build. The bar fight meter is pretty high with him, and it's 96, 97 with the fastball with a really good slider when he is on. So I am very bullish on Drew Rarick being a breakout guy for OU this year. But again, they're telling me in Norman that they think Cam Johnson's ready to take that step forward on the mound. If he is, big things could be on the horizon, potentially bigger things than just being a fringe top 25 team.
You mentioned Skip Johnson's history with pitchers. Worth noting, this past summer was the third time since the 2020 season that Oklahoma has had the entirety of its weekend rotation get drafted in the same year. So obviously the proof is in the pudding there. It might be a little bit of a transition period, but eventually they'll get there. Is it this year? Is it next year? We'll find out, but they are going to get there. It's just a matter of when. That kicks it back over to Bradley. Bradley's got the Virginia Cavaliers.
Yeah, I think Virginia is going to be one of the more exciting and interesting teams to follow in arguably all of college baseball this year. Obviously it's Chris Pollard, year one, after doing a phenomenal job at Duke and building that program up. Coming just short last year of that elusive Omaha trip, but brought over his whole staff, brought over a bunch of players from Duke, including, we mentioned Kyle Johnson earlier. He's really going to be huge in what the ceiling of this team is. And it's also probably a part of the reason they didn't quite make it into our top 25. There's some questions on the mound. Even, when you talk to Virginia staff, we have a lot of talent. But it's kind of like it could potentially be like that 2023 Duke staff where, they threw everything at every team. They'd use openers, they'd shuffle guys around, all kinds of things. But offensively, there's few teams that have, that the high-end star power that Virginia has. I mean, you have AJ Gracia, Eric Becker. Those two are just incredible offensive pieces. And then you add in, Joe Tierley from Rider. You add in potentially Kyle Johnson, Sam Harris, bunch of different pieces that are really talented offensive bats. We've seen them at Duke and at other stops. So I think Virginia's got a tremendous amount of upside. I think we sort of left them out to see what does Kyle Johnson look like at the top of the rotation? What do those Duke arms following him look like after that? And sort of how does the staff shake out into roles? But there's plenty of talent on this team.
Certainly a team that's on my short list of shrugs, like just a shrug of the shoulders, because the talent is what it is. But it just feels like we're waiting on a couple of pieces to fall into place before we go all in on them. Another team I think you can say that about is my team I'm going to talk about, which is the Troy Trojans, a team we have ranked before and would have ranked again, but just ended up on the cutting room floor. And what I like most about them is the position player group, because how could you not love the position player group? First of all, they've established a long track record of Troy position player groups just being dynamic, really having talent in the Sun Belt at a power conference level on the position player side of things. That continues. Jimmy Janicki at catcher is one name to know. Another is Blake Cavell at first base. Blake Cavell, you've probably seen not just on the field, but you've seen in interviews and in social media clips. Just a fun guy, good clubhouse guy, keeps everything loose there. But that's the thing, is that the position player group is going to continue to carry him. And that's not just a Troy thing. That is mid-majors in general. Pitching depth, pitching quality, so hard to come by. And below the power conference level, oftentimes that's the formula, is put together elite position player groups, then try to cobble the pitching together. That's going to be more of the question for Troy is what does the pitching end up looking like? It's a lack of proven guys. It's guys with stuff. They do a good job of stuff there. You ask Skylar Meade, and that's one of the things they do. They want to hit with power, they want to run, and they want to throw hard on the mound. And they've got plenty of stuff there. It's just unproven. It's part of a larger theme for Troy, frankly, too. They have 23 new guys on this roster, and that's just a lot. And especially when you consider the lineup is pretty experienced. So really outside of their core of lineup guys, it's basically an entirely new team if you think about it that way. So that's kind of what gives me a little bit of pause there. And I think one thing that is being held against them a little bit, and I'm probably as guilty of this as just anybody, is it still feels like we're waiting on Troy's big breakout season, right? They've been to regionals before. That's not a big deal, but they've had some near misses in regionals. They haven't broken through to get to a super regional. We think that's possible. We think that's in there. Certainly the administrative support is there. They've got the right coaching staff in place. They've got the talent to do it. They just haven't done it quite yet. And had they had maybe that breakthrough season, we'd be able to give them a little bit of more benefit of the doubt. But for right now, we're waiting to see what those new faces on the Troy roster end up looking like when it's all said and done.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Dallas Baptist, a consistent winner for a long time that has broken through to supers. But I mean, it's kind of been a while there too, and it's just a good reminder, like a program like that's good every year and has real talent every year. And it's still hard to win a regional. As a mid-major in particular, it just is. You're usually not at home for the regional when you're in that position, and that makes the job harder. And you just typically don't necessarily have the high-end pitching to match up with the ACC, SEC teams. Now DBU often does, but nonetheless, it's still hard to win a regional. And so, yeah, I think that's important to bring up in general for fans who get maybe antsy when their team doesn't get to Omaha or whatever. If you make a super, you're one of the last 16 teams standing, that's a great year. Full stop, in my opinion.
Well, it's one of the reasons why, just a quick aside, Runes isn't here, so I'll go ahead and put a plug in for it. One of the reasons why his whole idea about 32 hosts in the first round is intriguing to me is I think we do a better job of celebrating those teams that make good regional runs, but don't get to supers, or get to supers but get eliminated. I just think we'd have more time to celebrate a team that's making a deep run that ends short of Omaha, but that's neither here nor there. Aaron, your turn again. Go ahead.
As opposed to having about 2 hours to celebrate between the time they win the Sunday morning elimination game and the time they play the Sunday evening regional championship game.
Yep, correct.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I'm going to take East Carolina as the next team here. And this one, to me, is interesting because it's almost like a UCLA light. A couple of years ago, remember UCLA brought in that great freshman class and kind of took their lumps. And then but they all got a great experience. They did not make a regional that year, I don't think, but they came back the next year and were in Omaha, when all those kids were sophomores. I kind of felt like last year felt like ECU's version of that. They're kind of transitioned. They had this really exciting freshman class, and the year was a struggle. It was not a typical East Carolina season until the very end, the last 2 weeks conference tournament, and then the regional. They look great. They look like a classic ECU team. By the time I saw them in the regional down there at Conway, they looked really good. I just think that when you have the talented group that gains the experience on the fly, and they're stronger for the adversity, but then they also find something at the end. I just feel like that's oftentimes a springboard. And the talent is real here. They only lost really Dixon Williams Riley Johnson too, but he was hurt for most of the year. Dixon Williams is the key piece in the lineup they lost. He was their best player last year. But you've got stars here, with I think rising stars with Austin Irby, the sophomore, who's going to be the first baseman and was a machine in the postseason last year, just a wrecking ball, real emerging left-handed hitter with power at first base. I love Braxton Trammell in that sophomore class, expecting big things from him. We know Braden Burris is a high energy guy that just kind of the heart and soul of that team. He feels like a classic East Carolina, guy could wind up being like one of the most beloved players there. He's like a Lane Hoover type, just ECU dirtbag that probably has a little bit more, tools than Lane Hoover had. But Jack Herring had a really nice stretch run last year. He's back in the fold. Another really good kind of, just the guy that can flat out hit, and I think has more power to come as well. So there's a lot of nice pieces in that lineup that I think fit well together. There's a lot of depth. There's really good speed. This is a program that does like to push the action on the base pass, the inside game really well. That's just a staple of the Cliff Godwin team, and I think they'll do that again. And on the mound, you've got a first-team preseason All-American, anchoring this whole deal with Ethan Norby, who's just playing. He's a bad man. He's a bad man. He's nasty. 3,300 RPM spin rate, breaking ball and command the fastball with life. And he's a stud. Team USA guy, really, really good. But I like the pieces behind him too. Colby Weber is kind of that next, I think, potential great arm that they brought in this year in that freshman class. Really projectable. He's already up to about 97. We feel for, I think, 4 pitches. He's going to get a chance to be special. If Sean Jenkins, who was that kind of big arm in last year's class, if he matures now as a sophomore, that's 3 big time arms that can be tent poles for the staff, and you fill in around him with some other nice veteran pieces and some younger guys. And I just think they're going to be a lot better than they were last year. It feels like it's going to be a return to normalcy with East Carolina atop the American and probably back in the top 25 before too long.
Just to clarify, saying that Ethan Norby's a bad man is different than when you refer to me or others here as a bad guy.
Yeah,
like he's not
bad man and bad guy are totally different things.
Totally different.
He wants that smoke.
That's right. That's right.
Kendall, look. Bradley's sitting in a place where it's really cold and there's snow on the ground. Aaron and I are getting ready for snow this next weekend. Why don't you take us to a place where it's going to make us feel warmer? Take us to Santa Barbara, California, Kendall. Give us a peek into UCSB.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I've been to UCSB's campus a few times, just to go to games. And it's kind of one of those things now with more scholarships. It's like, wait a second, you want to give me a full scholarship and pay for me to go to school here? Like, I'll pay my own way. But that's a phenomenal place to play some college baseball. But, UCSB is a really interesting team in the sense that if the offense pans out, they could be a very good team. I think offensively, some of the key pieces that we do know of, Jonathan Mendez and Xavier Esker are both guys that can hit for some power. It sounds like Andrew Checkett is pretty bullish on Ian Fernandez's ability behind the plate to kind of break out offensively. He's a guy that, didn't put up, terrible numbers last year, but had a hamstring injury about halfway through the season and was on the shelf. So they think he's going to have a breakout campaign. As they kind of noted in the survey, there's a lot of competition. If you like competition, UCSB is going to be your team. They have 4 or 5 guys listed at multiple positions as potential starters. Nate Vargas is another guy that has some power potential as well for the Gauchos. But where their bread is going to be buttered is on the mound. Jackson Flora, obviously without Tyler Brimner from last year, Jackson Flora is going to be extremely important. He moves that Friday night role. It's a very high-level prospect, good athlete, quick arm, They think he's going to take another step forward from a stuff standpoint. Calvin Prosky returns the weekend rotation as well, the junior righty. He's just a projectable, pitchability guy who they think he's actually going to take a step up and get up to 94, 95 with his fastball this year. If that happens, you could see kind of his draft stock increase a great deal as well. And then they got a transfer in Long Beach State's, righty Kellen Montgomery. Again, just kind of a pitchability guy, throws a lot of strikes. He almost he runs that issue sometimes, guys, where he almost throws too many strikes. If you go back and look at his batting average against last year, it was over 300. So maybe mix in a few balls here and there, but he does have really good command of the zone. So, Kellen Montgomery will kind of round out that rotation. And then at the back end, they've got a nice piece in Cole Triba, who's certainly a household name in terms of relievers in college baseball. 91-94, solid sweeper. Keep an eye on the curveball. Andrew Chackett's added kind of a true curveball in the offseason. They think that pitch has a lot of promise. So, again, good rotation, Tribe on the back end, and then Nathan Aceves, the sophomore righty for them, another breakout candidate, was up to 98, 99 with his fastball in the fall. So a lot to love pitching-wise. The question mark with UCSB is just how much balance will it be from an offensive standpoint.
I don't know about you guys, but I feel a lot warmer after listening to that. That was helpful. Thank you very much for that. Go ahead.
Although Santa Barbara is not necessarily warm.
That's true. That's you got the hashtag marine layer. Thank you.
Yeah.
But the heat on that pitching staff will warm you up a little bit. They are going to.
Ooh, that was good.
Oh boy,
there we go.
Wow. You guys will let me interrupt your Abbott and Costello routine here to move on with the podcast. Well, I said at the top we did not rank these teams. However, I will say we do know who our team 26 was.
Oh boy.
And that is West Virginia. And
Bradley has 20 minutes for his pitch on this one.
The floor is yours. I'm gonna take off.
Yeah, see you guys later. It's no secret I pounded the table for West Virginia. I think there's fair questions around them when you look at what they lost from last year. 5 of their top 6 hitters by plate appearances, the whole weekend rotation. But at the end of the day, this is a program that's Randy Mazey takes them to supers in 2024. Steve Sabins takes them to supers last year. They win 44 games. And I just think there's a lot to buy with the Mountaineers right now. Like, that is a stock that is climbing. And there's some really good pieces back. Gavin Kelly is kind of a freak athlete because he can catch and play high level defensively in the infield. Armani Guzman, I saw him at the Clemson Regional last year, and he just kind of took over. And that's, 126 plate appearances last year, but that's a big, big breakout full season from him. And then what I think a lot of people knock, West Virginia, or questions around them is, that rotation. They're asking Chase Meyer to step up into that number one role. And, he's got electric stuff. There's no question about that. It's just, can he sort of dial it in and go deep in games? It's a lot of swing and miss, but it's tough to be, that high level as a starter. And then, they've had a ton of success in the Division II ranks. Griffin Kern, Derek Clark, like those are legit stars for them the last few years. They're doing it again. And sort of the upside there is Dawson Montesa, Chancellor Cole, like these are guys that had really good years at Division II. If that translates, West Virginia is in great shape. But yeah, I think overall the talent level is really high. They're really building out facilities there. They're really focused on player development. And I think the upside for them is just tremendous.
Yeah, it was a tough team to leave off because you weren't the only one pounding the table for them. But they end up being team number 26, and they'll just have to get to a super regional again, I guess, or go a little further. But hated to leave them off, but it is what it is. Go ahead.
Yeah, he did mention a really intriguing player, Gavin Kelly. I saw them play at U of H last year for a series, and he's one of few guys in college baseball that can play the outfield, also go to second base, and then, by the way, he's a pretty damn good catcher too. So can literally play any position on the field and do it really well.
That brings me to our last team. And a heads up, I was going to put you guys in the spot a little bit, so make sure you have the 12 teams we've talked about in front of you after I finish here, because I'm going to ask you one final question on our way out. So just make sure you have the list of teams up. I'm going to talk about UC Irvine. What I really like about this team is the rotation. You've got Trevor Hansen and Ricky Ojeda ready to go 1-2 in that rotation. Trevor Hansen, a guy who's just steady Eddie. I saw him on the Cape actually this past summer, and just a ton of strikes, like classic West Coast prototype right-hander of the stuff is good, but it's not great, but he's just going to throw a ton of strikes and move the ball around. So I love that as a Friday guy in these West Coast conferences where you just the big ballparks, the I guess the marine layer, if you will, it's just going to keep the ball in the ballpark. If you're in the strike zone and you compete, he does that. Ricky Ojeda gives you a little more upside, a guy who pitched for Team USA, and the ball comes out of his hands so easy. Like it is easy velocity coming from a guy who's not that big. Like he's just not that big of a guy, but it's a quick arm and the ball just explodes out of his hand. Pitched really, really well with Team USA over the summer. So you love that 1-2 there. And the third guy in the rotation projected, at least so far, is Cade Castles, a guy the coaching staff really refers to him as being advanced. And I think you start with Hansen and Ojeda, and that gives you a very good rotation, maybe a great rotation. If Cade Castles is really advanced and is ready to be that third guy with them in the rotation, now all of a sudden you're talking about an excellent rotation, best in the Big West, maybe rotation, one of the best on the West Coast type of rotation, which wouldn't be a surprise given the way UC Irvine operates. The concern here in particular is not just offense, but where does your physicality come from? Right, they lost a number of their top power bats from last season's team. This lineup is probably not going to be as physical when you lose Jacob McCombs and Colin Yeaman and Chase Call. Those guys hit almost 40 home runs. The team only hit 71 overall. Those three had 40 of them. Obviously, that's a big loss there. So, are you going to be able to generate enough offense? Is going to be a big question there. I thought it was put well by the coaching staff in some of the information they shared with us that no single projected starting position player has more than 250 career Division I at-bats. And for those who don't know the context of that, 250 at-bats is like slightly more than what you'd get in a regular season for a guy who plays 56 games. So it's right around that number. So nobody's really gotten more than a full seasons of at-bats in their projected lineup. And that's where the concern is. I have a great deal of confidence in the pitching staff keeping them in games, but it might be a situation where at least early on, Irvine's going to have to win a bunch of games 4-2. The good news is I think they can do that. I think that's going to be the blueprint for them moving forward, and then allow the lineup to come together a little bit as time goes on. All right. Are you guys ready to be put on the spot? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go around the horn here. We're going to stick with the same order. So Aaron's going to go first for us. Of the 12 teams we have here, if you had to throw a dart at the dartboard for one of these teams to get to Omaha, which team are you going to take? How are you going to act, Aaron? What you got?
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a real good one. I think the Ducks. The Ducks are due. I've been thinking for a long time the Ducks are due, and that's all. They're just due.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's fair. You get enough bites at the apple, right? I mean, that's the theory. You keep as Bum Phillips once said, we knocked on the door at first, and now we're going to kick the son of a you-know-what in, right? Yeah, that was a famous Bum Phillips quote.
Must have forgotten that quote.
That's a gem. Come on, know your beat.
What was the other one? Mama told him to take his cowboy hat off indoors or something. He would take his cowboy hat off whenever they had home games in the Astrodome because Mama told him to leave his hat off indoors.
That's a good one. I had not heard that one, but that sounds about right. What a gem Bum Phillips was.
Yeah. He was great.
That takes us to Kendall. Kendall, of these 12 teams, if you had to throw a dart and send one to Omaha, which one are you picking?
I like being very cruel to fan bases. So I'm going to say that Chris Pollard, in his first year at Virginia, takes Virginia to Omaha.
Sorry, Duke fans.
Sorry, Duke fans. Just the way it got to be. I do think if you look at these guys offensively, I mean, Joe Tiroli was the Metro Atlantic Player of the Year. He's going to make an instant impact. Eric Becker, AJ Gracia, Sam Harris, and then obviously there's some question marks pitching wise, but Chris Pollard's going to have a really good team, and they're going to have the lineup with the ability to get to Omaha. So yeah, sorry, Duke fans.
Bradley, what do you got?
Yeah, you sniped me. I was also going to say Virginia for pretty much the same reasons, plus the fact that Duke got so close, and they have the same staff. So everyone's there. They know what it takes. They know what not to do and what works and what doesn't work. And so for all the questions we may have about their pitching, I don't think there's a better group of coaches to handle those questions than this is a team that sometimes they didn't have a single starter that could go 5 innings. And if someone went 5 innings, I'm talking about Duke, it would be, unexpected and a boon. So I do think it's Virginia. And I was tempted to go West Virginia. But what we just said about how hard it is to get to supers, getting to 2, going to another, that's tough. So I'll stick with Virginia.
And you're right. I mean, they've done that repeatedly where they've just had to build an unorthodox pitching staff, and they've gone to supers. That Duke coaching staff. I do feel like there are enough pieces there that I'm totally with you. I trust their ability to, even if they often do have to make mid-season adjustments and just shuffle the roles, and even they did last year with Owen Proch, wound up being their Friday guy, giving them some stability. Every year it feels like they have a lever or two to pull, and they pull it at exactly the right time, and they make a run. And there's just enough talent there that I'm totally with you guys on that. I think that it's going to be a fun year there. There's so much star power, at the top of that roster. Not a lot of teams have what they've got, with multiple All-American caliber players to build around.
That brings it to me. Give me Ole Miss. They just have a couple of the things that I always pound the table and say you absolutely have to have in the postseason, and they're as follows. You have to be able to hit the ball out of the ballpark. When it's June and it's hot everywhere and you're playing in regionals and super regionals in these college ballparks where the ball flies, you've got to be able to hit the ball out of the ballpark, because I think we saw it last year with Ole Miss, right? Where they nearly pull off that comeback against Murray State in the regional final because the threat of the home run was just ever present with that lineup. I think it's going to be the same thing again with Ole Miss this season. So you love that. The second is they have a real dude on Friday, maybe the dude of all dudes on Friday in Hunter Elliott. And pitching depth is great. You want to have it if you can. But when it comes to the postseason, not the regular season, the postseason, I care less about your depth. Yes, you want it. I'm not saying you can't, it's just one guy. But if you made me choose extremely good depth or just a real dude on Friday, I think I'm taking the dude on Friday, because regionals, super regionals in Omaha, if you can win that opening game against the other team's best guy, that's going to set you up for success. And they've got that. So questions, sure, but they do have 2 of the hallmarks of Omaha teams year after year, and that's the ability to hit the ball out of the ballpark, and they have a guy they can trust on Fridays or game 1s of postseason series.
Great point.
Ultimately, all 12 exciting seasons ahead. These are 12 teams we really like. So again, I don't think any of these teams would be just downright shocking to see get to that stage. And that's the beauty of it. Our sport is still one where we have teams from all over the country and all different conferences that can break through and get this done. And certainly one of the reasons why the sport is to continue to be celebrated.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I think that's an episode. Oh, go ahead, Aaron, please.
I mean, remember Murray State and Coastal Carolina last year, as much as we talk about the SEC every year with the stranglehold, Murray State out of nowhere and Coastal not so much out of nowhere, but it's a 2 non-Power 4 conference teams that were in Omaha. One of them played for the national title. So to your point, Joe, it really does make, if you're an Irvine or a Troy or a Santa Barbara or a DBU or an East Carolina, you got a real shot, man.
Yep.
And that is what is great about our sport and why college football stinks.
There it is. We came all the way back around. This was just an hour and 3 minutes of Aaron just waiting for his opportunity to come back around.
He definitely had that written down on a notepad or something. Mention college football again.
Yeah. He looked at his wrist. He was like, and that's why college football stinks.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't remember what word he had. Anyway, that is going to do it for this episode of the D1 Baseball Podcast. Thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors, the presenting sponsor of this D1 Baseball Podcast. Want to thank my esteemed colleagues here, Aaron Fitt, Kendall Rogers, the whiz kid, Bradley Smart. Want to thank you, the listeners, for listening.